I used to believe marriages died quietly, like summer evenings fading into dusk. No drama, no noise, just a slow cooling of everything that once felt warm. That's what I told myself every time Samuel came home late, loosened his tie, and smiled at me the way a man smiles at an old photograph, fondly but from far away. Samuel Grant had been my anchor for 8 years. He wasn't perfect, too cautious, too obsessed with his work as a corporate strategist, but he was good, reliable, predictable. I told everyone I wanted a steady man, and I thought I'd found him. Until steadiness turned into stillness, and stillness turned into silence. I used to love our mornings. Coffee brewing, the faint sound of the paper unfolding, the way sunlight slipped through the blinds and painted the kitchen golden. But now, the air between us felt stale. He barely looked up when I spoke. I stopped speaking altogether. Somewhere between mortgage payments and unpaid dreams, we'd forgotten how to see each other. That's when Henry Barton appeared, my husband's boss, the charismatic CEO of Meridian Industries. He was everything Samuel wasn't: confident, commanding, the kind of man who filled every room with gravity. When Henry spoke, people leaned in. When Samuel spoke, people corrected him. The first time Henry touched my hand was at a company dinner. Just a casual brush when he poured me wine, but I remember the jolt like an electric current. It wasn't love. It was attention. And for someone starving for it, that felt close enough. The affair didn't happen all at once. It crept in, disguised as concern. Henry would call when Samuel stayed late. "You shouldn't eat dinner alone, Clara. Come to the club. We'll talk business." He'd ask about my paintings, the ones collecting dust in the basement. He remembered things my husband had long forgotten, like how I took my tea, or the name of the lake where we spent our honeymoon. The first time he kissed me, it was raining. We were standing under the awning of the Meridian Tower after a charity event. He'd just fired Samuel that morning. I should have hated him. Instead, when he cupped my face and whispered, "He doesn't see what he's losing," I let him kiss me. Maybe I wanted to punish Samuel. Maybe I wanted to feel alive. Maybe I wanted someone to look at me and see more than a disappointed wife. Whatever it was, it only took that one moment to undo 8 years of vows. The weeks that followed blurred into guilt and thrill. Henry's apartment became our hidden world: polished marble floors, expensive silence, a life without overdue bills or quiet resentment. I told myself it wasn't wrong if no one got hurt. But someone always does. Samuel was unraveling, and I could see it. He tried to mask it behind job interviews and polite smiles, but his eyes gave him away. Those tired blue eyes that used to light up when I walked into a room. I avoided them now, because in them, I still saw the man who'd once held me while I cried over our first miscarriage. I still saw the man who had built me a studio when we couldn't afford one. And seeing him reminded me that I was betraying someone who didn't deserve it. But I kept going. Henry was a master at convincing me we were the same. He'd tell me his wife never understood him, that he admired my strength, my composure. He called me his clarity. And I believed him because believing him made it easier to ignore the truth. I didn't love Henry. I loved the version of myself I became when he looked at me. Then came the night everything began to crumble. It was our anniversary, mine and Samuel's. He'd been distant for weeks, but that evening, he came home early with a bottle of champagne. I remember the sound of the cork popping, the faint tremor in his voice when he said, "We made it through worse, Clara. Maybe we can start again." For a second, I almost said yes, almost confessed everything. But while he was upstairs changing, Henry texted me, "Come to me. Now. I need you." And like a fool, I went. We were careless that night. Henry's place was only 10 minutes from our house, and for some reason, he insisted we meet there instead of his apartment downtown. He said he had a surprise. The surprise, it turned out, was my husband's champagne bottle hitting the dresser as he walked in on us. The world froze. Samuel's face went blank. No shouting, no rage, just a quiet, awful stillness. He set the bottle down beside my jewelry and said, "Because it looks like you've been doing plenty of talking without me." Henry tried to reason, fumbling for his shirt. I reached for words that didn't exist. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. My parents had come by for lunch. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. By the time I got dressed and went downstairs, Samuel was already talking to them. He looked calm, almost too calm. My mother complimented his professional success. He smiled and said he'd just landed a $25 million contract with Meridian Industries, Henry's company. I felt the blood drain from my face. And then Henry walked down the stairs. What happened next was a blur of pleasantries and panic. My parents gushed over Henry. Samuel played along with a politeness that terrified me. Then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I'm sure you'll both be discreet about why the CEO of Meridian spends his afternoons in our bedroom. Silence. Pure, clean, devastating silence. That was the moment I lost everything. My parents' expressions shifted from confusion to horror. Henry stiffened beside me, his mask cracking just enough to reveal the fear underneath.
And Samuel?
He just looked at me once, long, steady, final. Then he walked out.
He didn't yell.
He didn't throw anything. He just left, like a man walking away from a fire he no longer cared to put out. The next morning, the papers on the dining table were divorce documents. No message, no note. Just his signature on the first page. Henry tried to console me. He'll come around, he said. Men like him always do. But I knew better. Samuel never did anything halfway. Not love, not betrayal, not leaving. For a while, Henry and I pretended the fallout didn't matter. He kept his job. I moved into a downtown condo he paid for. We lived like ghosts, luxury hotels, charity galas, whispered apologies in the dark. But guilt has a way of rotting even the prettiest rooms. When I found out I was pregnant 2 months later, I didn't feel joy. I felt trapped. Henry called it a beautiful complication. I called it the consequence of every choice I'd made. Samuel didn't know. At least not yet. But the walls were closing in. Rumors started swirling in the Meridian boardroom. Henry's expense accounts were under review. Some consultant had been feeding the board financial irregularities, someone with inside knowledge. Henry grew paranoid. He'd pace at night, muttering about betrayal. I should have seen it coming. The very man who built his empire on manipulation thought everyone else played the same game. One night, he turned to me and said, if anyone asks, that account for the condo was part of our charity budget. Understand? That was the first time I realized Henry wasn't saving me. He was saving himself. And somewhere out there, Samuel was the one pulling the strings. I saw him again for the first time at the Meridian Charity Gala. He walked in wearing a tuxedo that didn't belong to the man I'd known. Confident, calm, untouchable. The crowd murmured his name. My chest tightened. Then Victor Lane, the company's former CEO, took the stage and announced a new partnership. Samuel Grant will be consulting for Lane's strategic solutions on matters concerning Meridian Industries. The room went still. Henry's face drained of color. Samuel had just declared war. And for the first time, I wasn't sure which of us would survive it. That night, after the gala, Henry slammed the car door so hard the window cracked. He's working with Victor Lane, he hissed. He's coming for me, and if you don't keep quiet, he'll drag you down too. I stared out the window at the city lights, one hand over my stomach. Maybe I deserve it, I said softly. He didn't answer. I thought love affairs were storms, loud, dramatic, over in a flash. But they're more like slow poison. You don't feel the damage until it's too late. By the time I realized I was alone, it wasn't just Samuel I'd lost. It was myself. The morning after the gala, I woke up in Henry's penthouse with a migraine and a pit in my stomach that no amount of champagne could numb. He was already awake, sitting by the window with his phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp, controlled. I don't care what the board says, Walter. They can't remove me over one consultant's opinion. Handle it. When he saw me stir, he ended the call mid-sentence and poured me coffee, all charm again, as if last night's public humiliation had never happened. Rough night, he said. You could say that, I whispered. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The room smelled like fear masked with cologne. That was the morning I realized how quickly love turns into liability. I spent the next week walking on eggshells. Henry was always on the phone, lawyers, accountants, damage control. The board wanted an internal audit, and though he never said it aloud, we both knew who was behind it. Samuel. The man I'd once shared a bed with had become a ghost haunting every corner of Henry's empire. It should have scared me, but part of me, some quiet, vengeful part, was proud. Samuel wasn't weak anymore. He wasn't the man I'd pitted. He was something else entirely, and I had helped create him. I started noticing things then, small things that didn't add up. Henry's bank accounts, once overflowing, were being quietly rearranged. He'd shut down our condo's housekeeper service. Jewelry he'd gifted me months ago disappeared for appraisal. And then, one afternoon, while I was searching his desk for a receipt, I found a letter from Victor Lane, Meridian's ousted CEO. It was typed, dated weeks before the gala. A single line stood out. "You've underestimated the man you fired." That's when I knew Samuel hadn't just come back for revenge. He'd come back with allies. The pregnancy wasn't planned. It never is. The test lay on the marble counter, 2 pink lines glaring up like a confession. I stared at it until my reflection blurred. Then I sat down on the cold bathroom floor and cried. Henry found me there an hour later, still clutching the test. He froze, then forced a smile. "Well, that changes things."
I wanted him to say it changed everything.
But he didn't. For a few weeks, he tried. He took me to appointments, made promises about houses and family futures. But the truth was, Henry Barton was a man who loved power, not people. And a baby didn't fit into his schedule. Meanwhile, my name was starting to circulate in whispers. The gala scandal had spread, though in carefully coded language. "Mrs. Grant has been spending time with Mr. Barton. The poor woman must be confused." Even my mother stopped calling. When I finally visited her, she answered the door in silence and handed me an envelope, Samuel's divorce settlement. "You're free now," she said flatly. "Free?" I laughed, bitter. "You make it sound like I won something." "No," she replied quietly. "You just lost less than he did." I signed the papers that night. The next morning, my name was officially no longer Clara Grant. Henry changed too. The charm that once drew me in now felt like calculation. His temper grew shorter. He'd disappear for hours, return smelling of whiskey and stress. Sometimes he'd look at me with that cold, assessing stare, the same one he used on junior executives he planned to fire. "You shouldn't spend so much, Clara. The auditors are watching everything. You said we were fine." "We were, until your ex-husband decided to play crusader." That word, crusader, stuck with me, because that's exactly what Samuel had become. And in a twisted way, I admired him for it. Then one evening, while Henry was out, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, Jules Morrison stood there, Samuel's friend. I recognized him from a photo years ago, back when Samuel still had friends to invite to dinner. He didn't smile. "You should know, Clara, your husband's not playing games. Henry's going down, and if you're smart, you'll stay out of it." "He's not my husband anymore," I said quietly. "Doesn't change the fact that you're pregnant with a man about to be investigated by the SEC." My stomach dropped. "How do you?" "Because Samuel knows," Jules said simply. "He knows everything." I wanted to slam the door, but my hands wouldn't move. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he doesn't want to destroy you, Clara. He just doesn't care to save you anymore." He left before I could answer. That night, Henry came home late, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. "We need to talk," he said. He poured 2 drinks and slid an envelope across the counter. Inside were photos, me and Samuel, years ago, laughing at some backyard barbecue. "He sent these," Henry said, with a note that said, "Remember who she used to be." His laugh was sharp, brittle. "He thinks he can shame me into guilt. Idiot." But I saw it, the tremor in his hand, the fear behind his arrogance. He was cracking. And when men like Henry Barton start to crack, people get crushed. The next morning, he left for a board meeting and didn't come back until midnight. He reeked of scotch and panic. "They're forcing me out," he said. Lane's report hits next week. Fraudulent accounting, misuse of funds, it's all there. Your ex fed them everything. Samuel? I whispered. Who else? He's been feeding Lane information for months. He looked at me, then really looked at me. You knew, didn't you? No, I said truthfully. He hasn't spoken to me. Of course not, Henry sneered. He doesn't need to. He's already won. He turned away, pacing. If this goes public, I lose everything. The company, the board, my reputation. Do you understand what that means?
I did.
It meant I'd chosen the wrong man again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Samuel, how quietly he'd walked away that day, how calm he'd seemed when the world was falling apart. Maybe he'd always been stronger than I gave him credit for. The next day, I drove to his office. His assistant tried to turn me away, but he heard my voice and came out himself. He looked different. Lighter. Maybe even happy. Clara, he said evenly. I didn't expect to see you. I had to. You know, don't you? About the baby? Yes. He didn't sound angry. Just finished. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean for. You don't need to explain, he interrupted. It doesn't matter anymore. He looked past me, toward the window where the city's skyline glowed faintly. You and Henry made your choices. Now you'll both live with them. Samuel, please don't. Don't what? Hold him accountable? You think I'm doing this because of you? He smiled faintly, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd once loved. No, Clara. This isn't about love anymore. It's about balance. I felt something inside me crumble. He'll take me down with him, I whispered. Then you should have picked better company, he said softly. And just like that, the meeting was over. 2 weeks later, Henry was gone. The news broke everywhere. Meridian CEO resigns amidst financial scandal. The board stripped him of his position, froze his accounts, and replaced him with a new name. Victor Lane, of course. Henry left Chicago the same night, claiming he needed space. I never saw him again for months. I gave birth to a son that winter, Michael. He had Henry's eyes and my mother's frown. Samuel sent flowers. No note. I cried anyway. For a while it was just me and the baby. I thought maybe that would be enough, just quiet mornings and bottles and lullabies. But grief and guilt don't disappear. They linger like smoke. I started spending again. Jewelry, clothes, expensive dinners I couldn't afford. Money became my distraction, validation, punishment, all at once. And when the loneliness crept back in, I found new ways to fill it. Young men who called me beautiful, who didn't know my past. I told myself I deserved to feel alive again. But deep down, I knew I was just trying to prove I still mattered to someone. Henry found out, of course. He always did. He showed up one night, angry, disheveled, eyes hollow from losing everything. You've gone through my money like water, he said. It's our money, I shot back. No, Clara. It was never yours. I let you spend it because I pitied you. But now I'm done. He took Michael's hand, gently, like a father who actually meant it. He stays with me, Henry said. You can visit, but he needs stability. I wanted to fight, but I couldn't. I had no home, no savings, no strength left.
So I let him go.
Now, when I walk past playgrounds, I sometimes see them, Henry pushing Michael on the swings, both of them laughing. He looks older, humbler, maybe even happier. And I stand across the street, invisible, clutching my coat tighter. Samuel remarried last spring. A woman from his consulting firm. I saw the announcement in the paper. He looked genuinely at peace. And me? I rent a small apartment now, paint again, and pretend I'm rebuilding. But some nights, when the city goes quiet, I wonder how it all went wrong. I thought I was escaping loneliness when I left my husband. Turns out, I was just walking toward a quieter kind. Freedom, I've learned, is a funny thing. People romanticize it, talk about starting over, finding yourself, shedding the past. But they never mention the silence that comes with it. The kind that seeps into your bones until even your heartbeat feels too loud. It's been 3 years since my world burned down, since I traded a quiet marriage for chaos, and chaos for solitude. Sometimes I still wake up expecting Samuel beside me, the faint hum of the coffee machine downstairs, the smell of the same cologne he wore for years. But the only scent now is turpentine and stale air from my tiny studio apartment. I paint again, not because it saves me, but because it fills the hours between dusk and regret. My art used to be bright. Landscapes, flowers, soft skies. Now it's grays and broken lines, cityscapes swallowed by fog. People call it moody realism. I call it honesty. Henry still sends checks. Not out of kindness, but because he knows I won't cash them. He says it's for Michael's mother. That's what I am now, a title without a role. The custody agreement was clear. Michael lives with Henry. He's 5 now, bright, curious, and too young to understand the wars that built his world. I see him twice a month, supervised, like a stranger with visiting privileges. The first time he called me Miss Clara instead of Mom, I went home and threw out every baby photo I had. I thought I'd feel lighter. I didn't.
Henry has changed.
He's softer now, humbler, though still sharp when he wants to be. He works from a smaller office, wears cheaper suits, drives himself instead of using a driver. Sometimes when I drop by for visits, I see him sitting on the floor playing blocks with Michael, his sleeves rolled up, his hair uncombed. A version of him I never got to know. Once, when I was leaving, I asked him, "Do you ever think about how it all started?" He paused, then said, "Every time I look at him." I wanted to ask if he ever thought about me, but I didn't. Some questions are better left unanswered. I tried dating again after the divorce, not because I wanted to fall in love, but because I couldn't stand being invisible. The men were younger, charming in that restless, thoughtless way youth often is. They liked the mystery, the older woman with sad eyes and a past she refused to explain. I liked the distraction. But distractions fade fast. They stopped calling once they realized I wasn't glamorous, just lonely. And maybe they were right. By then, the money Henry had set aside for me was nearly gone. Rent, dinners, new dresses I couldn't afford, all gone in the name of pretending I was still someone worth noticing. One night, after another man left without saying goodbye, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "You did this, Clara. You built this emptiness." And for the first time, I didn't cry. I just nodded. A year later, I got a letter from Samuel. Not a message, not an email, a letter, handwritten in that neat, careful script I used to love. "Clara, I hope you're well. I heard about your exhibit. Congratulations. You always had more talent than you believed. I thought you should know I'm moving. Emily and I are buying a place near Lake Geneva. It's quiet there. You'd like it. I don't know if peace is something we ever earn, but I think I've finally stopped fighting for it. Take care of yourself. Samuel." I read it 5 times before folding it back into its envelope. It didn't hurt. Not really. It just felt final. Emily, his new wife. I'd seen a photo of her once online. Kind eyes, simple smile, the kind of woman who looked like she'd never been tempted to ruin her own life for attention. Good for him, I thought. He deserved simple after me. The last time I saw Michael was in the park, last autumn. Henry had brought him to feed the ducks. He spotted me from across the path and waved, his tiny hand smudged with breadcrumbs. "Miss Clara, look," he shouted, holding up a feather like a trophy. I smiled and waved back, pretending my chest wasn't caving in. Henry walked over, hands in his coat pockets, his face unreadable.
"He's getting big," I said.
"He's 5. Time doesn't wait," Henry replied. There was a long silence. "You've done well with him," I said quietly. "We both did what we could," he answered. When I turned to leave, he called after me, "Clara, don't disappear completely." I didn't look back. Because if I had, I might have begged him not to stop me. Winter came early that year. Harsh, gray, relentless. I spent Christmas alone, listening to the radio and pretending the city lights outside my window were stars. I'd been invited to Henry's holiday gathering, but I couldn't bring myself to go. I didn't belong there anymore. Not with the man I'd destroyed, not with the son who no longer called me mother. That night, I painted until sunrise, a large canvas of a snow-covered field, and a single figure walking away from a burning house. When I finished, I titled it The Cost of Freedom. It sold the next week for more money than I'd ever made in my life. Sometimes, the universe has a sense of irony. The more I painted my mistakes, the more people wanted to buy them. Critics called my work brutally introspective. They didn't realize I was just painting my confession. With the money, I moved to a small cottage near the lake, not far from where Samuel lived now, though we never crossed paths. I'd see him sometimes at the local market, from a distance, Emily beside him, laughing at something he said. He looked older, calmer. Content. Once, he glanced up and our eyes met for a second. No anger, no pity, just quiet acknowledgement. And then he turned away, his hand resting lightly on Emily's shoulder. I think that was the moment I finally understood forgiveness. It's not something you ask for. It's something that happens when the person you hurt simply stops needing to hate you. Henry never remarried. He devotes himself entirely to work and to Michael, who's thriving, top of his class, loves chess, has Henry's stubbornness and, unfortunately, my restlessness. He sends me cards sometimes, crayon drawings of animals and rockets, always signed M. Henry never writes anything extra, just forwards them quietly, like a man honoring an old debt. And that's okay. That's all I deserve. People sometimes ask if I'd do it differently, if I'd stayed with Samuel, ignored Henry, fought for what I already had instead of chasing what I thought I wanted. And I always say the same thing. You can't rewrite a story you refused to read the first time. Because that's what I did. I lived blindly, assuming love would wait while I looked for something shinier. By the time I realized my mistake, it had already found someone else. Now, my days are simple. I paint, I walk by the lake, I read. Some evenings I light a candle by the window, not for prayer, but for memory. A small flame for what I ruined and what I learned. Freedom didn't give me happiness. It gave me truth. And sometimes that's enough. One evening, while I was cleaning the studio, I found an old photograph, Samuel and me at the lake house, years ago. He's laughing, sun in his hair, and I'm holding a brush with paint on my cheek. We looked happy, unguarded, alive. For a moment, I wanted to tear it in half. But instead, I pinned it above my canvas, not as regret, but as a reminder. A reminder that love, once broken, doesn't always return. And that sometimes the cost of freedom is everything you once called home.